Hi, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. One of the things that I've talked about in the past is the importance of gesture. If you're not familiar with gesture, gesture is sort of not just a human gesture, but it's that little something about a photograph. It could be, the way a hand is placed or the tilt of a head, but it can also be something else. That little something that helps elevate that image and that moment into something really, really interesting. I think Jay Maisel coined the whole idea of light, gesture, and color, and he has a great book on the subject that you should check it out. I'll have a link for it in the show notes. It's a really a wonderful book, and it really sort of can open your eyes to this whole idea of being able to break up the frame into various elements, specifically in this case, gesture. Now, when I've talked about gesture in the past, I've always talked about sort of the singular gesture, that one subject, and let's just say it's a person, doing something in terms of their hands, their body language, and helps to make the image more than just someone standing in the frame. It makes sure that it isn't boring. There's something about the body language and the gesture that really makes it visually interesting. Well, today I wanted to talk about the whole idea of having more than one subject exhibiting gesture. I think it's very easy to just think of one person, one element in the frame having gesture. But one of the challenges is, can you make a photograph in which multiple elements within the frame exhibit gesture and still have it hold together and not have one gesture sort of detract or become a distraction from another? So I chose three images that I thought were really good with respect to that. First image we have here is by Jason Ogulnik, shot with the Nikon D750 at 1/500th of a second at f2.8 at ISO 3200. He says here that this is a audition, I guess a dance audition, and this image is really interesting in a variety of different ways, especially in terms of it just being a layered composition. You have these legs of one of the dancers in the foreground, which frames the dancer that's immediately behind them. And then we have the dancer over to the left. There's a depth to this image. It's a two-dimensional image, but it isn't flat. We really have a sense of depth here. We even have the people out in the audience, who I assume are the people who are either judging the audition or other dancers that are getting ready to come on stage to audition. But in respect to gesture, I think this is one of those images that I think exhibits gesture with all three of the characters in this frame. We have it, even though we don't see the first dancer who takes up the foreground, the gesture is just by the placement of the legs, the sort of tension that you can feel in the foot, in the calf, and the thigh in this shot. It's really sort of beautiful, especially the way the toe is just touching the surface of the ground. Then we have the gesture of the dancer immediately behind the subject whose legs we see in the frame, who's in the middle of a movement. You can see the way her hair is sort of spinning above her as she sort of moves her head down towards the floor. There's a gesture that's exhibited not only by that movement of hair, but also her arms and her legs. And then we have that subject in the far left, who is in her own movement, a very different movement, but again, that's gesture. And I think it's really kind of interesting because the subject, the dancer behind the pair of legs, is exhibiting a more sort of fluid movement. It seems to be not necessarily more relaxed, but it seems like she's in a flow, while the other one is sort of exhibiting the exact opposite of that. It seems to be like a moment of tension because of the rigidity of her arms and her legs. And the legs that we see in the foreground sort of are somewhere in between those two. And I think this shot, when I looked at it, I felt like, wow, this is a really wonderful shot because of how gesture informs not only the individual subjects within the shot, but how they come together really nicely. It's a very graphic shot, which also helps make this shot as good as it is. But it's all about gesture for me. And even though these subjects are all doing something very differently, it just merges and just there's a synchronicity to it. There's something that just resonates and just flows to the image in a way that is really, really satisfying. Jason did a wonderful job with the shot. Okay, so here we have a shot by Jeff Williams. This was shot with a Nikon D800 with a shutter speed of 1/1600th of a second at f8 at ISO 1600. So the gesture here is really sort of interesting. Not only is it the gesture of the man on the right cutting the toenails of the other, but it's also the gesture of the man who's looking towards the camera in terms of the placement of his right hand, but also the placement of his left hand. There's a gesture that both of these men are sort of combining to help to make that moment what it is in the shot. But there's also these other pair of men in the back who are just talking, and the man on the right is using his hands to gesture as he's talking to the man on the left. And I like the fact that hands play a real big role in this shot with these two figures. It's really interesting that I immediately go back to that area in the back because this area immediately behind this man's face is so bright, and actually is possibly one of the brighter elements in the frame. So your eye is naturally drawn here. So it's nice that you have this gesture that kind of mimics the hand gesture and the connection of these two men with these two men here in the foreground. These two men in the background really aren't key to what's happening here. They're not related in reality to those people, but because of their placement, because they exist there, having that gesture that sort of mirrors what's happening in the foreground allows us to sort of go back and forth and be connected to the point we're not feeling that thing that's happening in the background is a distraction. Sometimes you can have activity behind the main subjects that does become a distraction, that pulls your eye away from what's happening with the main subject, and it weakens the impact of the shot. And I don't feel that happens here, even though that area immediately behind those two people in the back is so much brighter. It can be kind of tricky because there's so much stuff that you don't have control of when you're out there photographing, especially doing travel photography or street photography. You can't control all those elements. But what you can control is your awareness of them and making the conscious choice to either include it or exclude it. I don't know if Jeff was conscious of the fact that these two men were there and that this gesture was going to play an important role in his shot. You know, for I think many of us, we're just not aware of it, and we only realize it well after we've made the shot. But what I'm trying to encourage people to do, and I try to do it myself, is to not just be so focused on what's happening with my main subject and try to think about what's happening in the background and making a conscious decision to include it or exclude that from the frame. Because once you've taken the shot and once you've opened it up on your computer, it's too late. You can't change anything. Some people will use Photoshop and clone stuff out. I'm not of a mind to do that. I'm trying to get it right in the moment that I make the photograph, and that's why it's so important for me to constantly be paying attention to everything in the frame, because I would like to think that if I see a scene like this, I am going to be conscious of the fact that there are two other men behind my main subjects, and I want to purposely include them in the frame and stay aware of their gesture, their body language, their hands, their reactions to each other, and make a conscious choice to include the right moment for all the subjects in my frame, so I can make the shot that I really intended to make, rather than just letting it amount to luck or chance. Here's another shot by Suresh Naganathan. We don't have any XF information on this one here. This is really an interesting shot. It's largely silhouette. Here we have this vendor, I assume is a vendor here, who's working behind this umbrella in order to sort of block the sun. And the gesture in his hand, it looks like his hands are here in the frame here with these, I'm not sure exactly what these are fruits or something. So the gesture isn't so much his hands as just his existence within the frame, the way his face and the brim of his hat is profiled against this white triangle here in this area. In this area of the frame. But there's a gesture that's happening with the two figures that are silhouetted behind the umbrella. And these two subjects are having a very similar hand gesture as their hands are raised to their faces for whatever reason. Could it be that they're sort of blocking the sun from hitting their eyes? It could be. We don't know, but it really doesn't matter. But it's these three silhouettes that play off of each other incredibly beautifully. I think it's a really interesting shot. I love the tension that's created by having these two figures who are raising their hands to their face, looking off in opposing directions. There's a tension that's created there. And the face on the left, the one that's in profile with the hat, sort of helps guide our eye to that area of the frame where those two figures exist. And then we have the repetition of the triangles and the contrast between the blue and the white, and also just the frame of the umbrella. All of that stuff is just working incredibly nicely. This image is pretty simple. I mean, if you look at the other image here, there's a lot of stuff happening, right? Really, really busy shot. But this shot is much more simplified. And when you have something that's as simplified as much as this, the gesture becomes all the more prominent. It becomes all the more important because it's weighted for the gesture, because all these other potential distractions sort of can minimize the impact of a gesture. But when you have something as strong as this, and you've eliminated all the other sort of visual noise that can eventually sort of weaken a shot, the gesture becomes at the key to the shot. It isn't just the fact that these people are in silhouette for me that makes a shot. I mean, we've all seen silhouettes of people and they're just kind of static. They're just there. But there's something about the way the hands play a role in each of these silhouettes that makes the shot really, really interesting and just really lovely. Hope that's helpful. Get a lot of feedback on these videos, and I'm really appreciating everything I hear about it. We are certainly hoping to do a lot more with this channel in the near future, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff to do around these offices and just not enough time. But hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll be having some new content here that expands beyond what we've been doing here with the critiques. But I do appreciate all the wonderful feedback that I've been getting from people about these videos. So thank you so much. And if you've never heard of the Candid Frame and you want to hear great conversations with some of the world's best photographers, well, look for us at thecandidframe.com, where we have hundreds of conversations with some of the world's best photographers. And you can check it out by going to thecandidframe.com and streaming the interviews online, or you can listen to the interviews here on YouTube. They're released each Sunday night, and you can stream them here on YouTube. Or better yet, you can get the Candid Frame app, which is available for Windows, Android, and Apple iOS. And that's completely free, and that gives you access to the complete archive of interviews, over 344 interviews to date over the past 10 years. So check it out. And if you're liking what you're seeing in this video, please subscribe and help spread the word. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.